Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining most recent economic update. And we have a special guest today, Katie Linfield, Sequoia Certified Financial Planner, and she's going to be talking about financial planning in the age of COVID. So I'm going to start off the webinar this afternoon with some economic updates. And wow, what a difference 2 weeks has made. So a lot of the questions that were sent to me in advance are actually really tied to things I'm going to talk about today. So I will also address the questions, but maybe not as in-depth since I'll be talking about it. I'm going to talk for approximately 20-25 minutes and hand it over to Katie and then close out. So if you have questions, send them early on if possible, and I'll do my best to address every single one of them. If I don't do it in the very beginning, I'll do it towards the end. And if I don't catch you, I will follow up with you if I can see your name. So as I said, what a difference 2 weeks makes, right? We were reopening the economy across the nation, some states faster than others. Case rates were declining, death rates declining. It all looked like we might just brush the worst of it, or at least things would slow down until which time we had viable treatments and vaccines. But that being said, the cases begin to rise and rise quite rapidly, especially in states in the South and here in California in the West. A major part of the reason for this, and I'm going to be brief on the COVID, but it does tie into what's going on with the markets. The major reason for this is rapid increase of testing. Okay, so tests are widely available and free across the nation. As companies begin to open, many employers were requiring employees to get tested before returning to the workforce. And so that caused the testing rates to go up rapidly. So we begin to catch a lot more of the asymptomatic people, a lot more of the people that wouldn't ordinarily go for testing. In addition to the fact that the opening, whether it's the government's opening up and allowing businesses to open, or people opening up on their own by having gatherings in their homes, attending large group events. What I'm about to say I know sometimes catches people a little bit, but I want to say protesting or any groups where people are not wearing masks can put things at risk. I'm in no way saying that's the cause of this, but it's a combination of many, many things where people were just becoming less cautious that also led to an increase in case rates. So in addition to increased testing, we also have the virus is still spreading. It did not go anywhere. It did not take a summer vacation. So that being said, rates are up. But I would like to share with you one thing that is optimistic and does not get quite as much attention as it should. And that is, as of 2 days ago, the death rates were 0.6%. We are not seeing a meaningful increase in deaths correlating with the increase in cases. Now, of course, obviously new cases, deaths are delayed by that, so it's something we're watching very closely. But one reason for this may well be, or actually maybe two reasons, they're very important. Number one is that the average age of people that are diagnosed is dropping significantly. So in California, it's somewhere in the 40s by age, and in Florida, it's around 33 or so. So a lot more young people are being diagnosed, and young people tend to have better outcomes. Number two, the hospitals, the doctors, the nurses, the healthcare professionals on the front lines are getting much smarter about how to care for people. There are now treatment regimens that can lead to much better outcomes. The plus side is that if you go through the treatment regimen, you're much less likely to die or become ICU level of admission. The downside to it, of course, is that it requires you to stay in the hospital for an extended period of time in order to receive these tests. But when COVID began, people were basically, when they were tested, they were symptomatic and they were tested and they were diagnosed, they were generally told to go home, quarantine themselves, and rest, drink plenty of fluids, etc. Unfortunately, for those at high risk or with pre-existing conditions, they would get sicker and sicker and sicker, and by the time they came back, they were usually very, very ill to the ICU level. Now, they're much more wiser about knowing who's at high risk and are more likely to admit these people earlier and put them through a regimen that makes it less likely for them to get as ill. In addition to that, things that have been learned, and I have a lot of knowledge on this. My sister works up in a hospital up in Seattle, and she's been on the front line since the beginning, but things like ventilators and the repercussions of putting people on ventilators, of them dying or becoming seriously ill from other things like kidney failure, strokes and the like. And sometimes rolling them on their bellies actually has a better outcome. So not to go too far into that, but I wanted to kind of share this at a high level, watching closely. On an economic front though, the government's reaction, and in various ways across the country, is to shut down parts of the economy again. Some states yes, some states no. Some states yes, some states no. But this is really having an impact on how the economy is doing, because if people get nervous, they pull back. In some places, businesses had only been open a couple of days and were then forced to shut down again. And it's random, and it's not really necessarily making sense. For example, restaurants are allowed to be open, but bars have to close, right? Restaurants that have outdoor can have their outdoor open, but the indoor closes. Bars, outdoor and indoor closes. A lot of inconsistencies is keeping a lot of businesses becoming cautious and not really investing in opening and growing or bringing people back. In addition to that, we have a lot of uncertainty around the other things that have been taking place in the economy right now, which is while big parts of the economy are growing and growing at a rapid clip, and it's great news, we also have areas of the economy beginning to stagnate. So this is now bringing us to the plates that I talked about before, which is going to be the time of stagnation, the time of slowness. The markets can become quite volatile up and down, but maybe not make a lot of forward progress. And this could go on well into the fall, perhaps even into the winter. It's too soon to say yet. Overall, the markets and the economy will continue to grow throughout this time, but much slower with a lot greater uncertainty. So this is something to watch and watch closely. Which brings me to the question that has come up, a number of the questions is, why is the market doing so well when things are getting worse? As I've mentioned a number of times before, the market is forward-looking. But what's really, really important right now, and this is going to really set the stage for the next few months, or next couple of months at least, we have just begun going into earnings season. So last earnings season, which started in April, companies were given a lot of leeway. They didn't really have to report numbers because nobody really knew. They didn't have to report guidance, and nobody really could for upcoming quarters because of the great uncertainty that the nation was facing in April. But now, companies are being held to task. We, as analysts, we not only want the numbers, we also want guidance. And your guidance better be really, really good, really accurate. There better be a why behind it. And when I say better, we're really picky right now. Because what's happened is there's a tremendous dispersion in which companies have done well, which have not, and who have not done well but are going to shoot out the gate really quickly. And that's where the opportunities arise. So there's some sectors and companies that have held up really well and even gone up much higher. And there are others that suffered greatly and are coming back up. And when they recover, they're going to be the great investments. And there's others that are going to crash and may even well go bankrupt. We expect a number of bankruptcies in publicly traded companies in the upcoming months, which is very important, why you need to know what you own and why I need to spend a lot of time paying attention to the numbers over the next few weeks as we roll into earnings season. So earnings will tell us if the market is fairly valued as a collective whole, but we will see again a lot of dispersion on companies that are either over or undervalued. So far we've actually seen a number of companies that were undervalued and have shot up quite a bit as earnings season is unrolling. So this is a critical part of this, but understand the decoupling between the COVID issues, the economy, the other issues in the news, and the markets are forward-looking. Next one I want to talk about kind of ties into the shutdowns. The shutdowns create, as far as publicly traded companies, so I do want to separate that from privately held small businesses, because this is a tale of two recoveries. There are many, and we're looking at numbers around 38% of businesses, especially in the hospitality and entertainment, restaurants and the like, that will fail during these times. I mean, that's a realistic number at this point, given unless there's some significant government stimulus that targets this space, many will not survive. And there's a lot of reasons for that. So for the purpose of this, I want to talk more about the publicly traded space, because I want to make sure I'm using time well, and that's really what many of you have me working on for you. But know that if you want to understand more in the private space, especially if you have a business, I have analysis and research on that, and I'm more than happy to go into that on an individual level. But in the publicly traded space, there are many companies that are highly leveraged. The unfortunate nature of the way that our economic system is designed and our markets are designed is companies live and die on their quarterly earnings reports. There's been a push for years with people, and myself being one of them, to say it would be so much better for companies if they could have a longer term perspective, because then they can focus on things like their workers, like their environment, like their communities, without having to worry about hitting those numbers every quarter. Unfortunately, there's another argument to that which says that provides transparency to investors, and I can see that. Transparency, you can see if there's issues going on, you can catch them really quickly and not have to wait a year. By then, maybe it's too late to sell your stock. So I see both sides to this argument, but the unintended consequence of that is companies are so focused on hitting that next quarter, oftentimes they take a lot of short-term thinking to get there. It's exacerbated by the fact that many of the executives' bonuses and pay is based on that as well. So companies have, in many cases, taken on tremendous leverage and tremendous debt to acquire other companies, to buy back their shares, or to do other more short-term thinking, and has put them in a precarious position right now as their revenues plummet. And so this is why we're going to see companies that you may think are doing really well, but what we see is we see the level of debt, and we also see if they can't pull it together this quarter, in some cases this quarter, and in most cases within next quarter, they will cease to exist and we don't want to own them. So understand the dispersion, understand the fact there's a big difference in who's doing well and who's not, which brings me to the other question, which is about the technology sector and is it overvalued? Yes, based on what we know, there's a number of companies that are trading well above their reasonable valuations and likely we'll see a significant correction in share price at some point. We don't know when. There's always a point when investors say, hey, wait a minute, does this still make sense? And kind of run for the exits. None of them are companies that aren't making money, but they're not making money that justifies their share price. There was a kind of a little bit of a complacency in, technology is not being affected by COVID. It'll do just fine, but it's driven up valuations in expectations that may or may not be realized, in some cases likely not be realized. Again, I'm not going to mention specific companies, but there's a close watch on some very well-known companies right now that are at some risk there. But not the entire markets though. The growth area, the growth sectors went up much faster and the value sectors are coming up behind them. So you've got the leaders and you've got the followers. And there's some great charts on that by sectors that I track. And imagine like a roller coaster that's doing this. And usually if you imagine a train, there's a lead train and there's all these little cars behind it. So you can see who's leading down, who's leading up, and who's following. And the order of the cars is always changing. So that's something to watch as well. The stuff that people don't want sometimes is the best to buy, but not always. Because there are some sectors and some industries that will struggle for the foreseeable future until we have a viable vaccine and until we have a treatment. Last thing I'm going to address, and then I'm getting ready here to hand it over to Katie, is the issue kind of around the stimulus. So the Congress, House, the Senate, the President are all working on the next round of stimulus. That will likely get passed by the end of this month. There's going to be some significant changes to it. They're working on it now, but there will be more stimulus. It's not going to look the same. And I will save most of those updates either on an individual level or on a next call that we're going to do. With that being said, I am now going to turn myself off and allow Katie to turn herself on. Katie has been with us since the beginning of Sequoia. For those of you who don't know Katie, she's a brilliant financial planner and a brilliant strategist and has a tremendous amount of skill and expertise in a lot of what's going on right now in a time in which many people are rethinking their lives and readjusting priorities, and also with tremendous changes in the laws and the rules around the CARES Act, the Secure Act, etc. There's many little tidbits out there in the planning world. So with that being said, I'm going to hand it off to Katie and I'll come back and say bye to you later on.
Right. Thank you, Kristina. Thanks everyone for joining in and listening here. I'm Katie Linfelt, Certified Financial Planner. What I do day in and day out is help people figure out how do we get you from where you are today, where you want to be, and are you on that path? Really what I'm looking to help with in everything I do. And a whole lot of that is a combination of the fact that your decisions and goals may overlap and change from day to day, and simultaneously, the world doesn't stand still. Even more evident at the moment than average, but things change, and so the plans you make may need to change as we go forward. So I'm going to give you some updates on a few of the regulations that have changed and some ideas of things you may want to consider for your own lives. And then a little bit on the big picture side. What can you do as an individual to have, some security in changing times?
I'm off screen.
With that segue, the first thing I'm going to talk about is called the Secure Act.
This one?
This went into play at the beginning of this year, so prior to the age of COVID. But, it does have some implications for today. The Secure Act is focused on retirement savings. The goal is, to make some modifications there. The biggest change in my life, at this moment in life, working with clients day in and day out, is RMDs, those required minimum distributions, or as I describe it, you have your retirement account, you have not yet paid taxes, and at some point the IRS would like their tax money, please. So the required minimum distributions used to start at the very confusing age of the year following the year in which you turn 70 and a half. They simplified that and made that the year you turn 72. Much more simple there. The people who that is funny for is the folks who turned 70 and a half and had to take it last year and don't this year, handful of folks. So that's much simpler for planning purposes of when you have to start taking. You can, of course, take from those accounts far sooner, and there's a couple of reasons why you might want to consider that. The first one would be for those folks who have saved enough that there will reach a point in time when your minimum distributions are more money than you need when you combine that with other income sources to live off of. As annoying as taxes are, and particularly taxes in retirement, when you're paying taxes on money that you are not currently earning, it's really annoying to pay taxes on money you earned and didn't need, such as withdrawing more from these retirement accounts than you really needed to do so. So that's where you may want to consider taking a little bit sooner to spread it so there is less money in that account later on in the years because your minimum percentage increases. It's a longevity table there. And one thing that did not change in the Secure Act is a favorite tool of mine for planning is that if you are already or would like to begin making contributions to a charity, one of the best ways to do that for many people is from your retirement account. If you have that check written directly from the account, so it never hits your checking account, goes straight from the IRA, from the 401k, over to the charity, that counts as a distribution from your account. So if you are required to take a minimum distribution, counts as that distribution or part of that distribution, and does not count for your income taxes. This is fantastic, especially under current tax law, where so many people are not itemizing, and so you're not able to get a charitable deduction. This is better than a deduction, straight off your income. You made that much less in taxable income. And so that's a recommendation I have many people who give charitably to consider. So RMDs now start at age 72. They did not change the age for this qualified charitable distribution. It is still the year in which you turn 70 and a half. So that's an option and a worthwhile consideration there. The other thing that changed is if you are still working past 70 and a half, in the past you could no longer contribute to an IRA. It had to do with the fact that you're pulling money out, so putting more money in was messy, and so they just said, nope, can't do it. Well, they changed that. You can still contribute. You still have to take the RMDs out, so it's ends up with this net amount, a little fussy, but it's still available. So if you would like to keep doing that, if that makes sense for your personal situation, that's still an option, so long as you or your spouse is still working past age 70 and a half or past 72. There's now no maximum age to contribute. The other big change to the Secure Act that hits our clients frequently is the elimination, or really it's a reduction in what was called the stretch IRA. So there used to be this option where you could leave your IRA, right? So money you have not yet paid taxes on, to someone significantly younger than you. You have to take out RMDs based on your age. You're 75, you pass, and it goes to your child who's 40. Okay, well, their life expectancy table means that the percentage they have to withdraw is so much less, and it lasts that much longer. They reduced that. Now, the stretch IRA will still last if it goes to your spouse, if you can leave it to a minor child, and until their age of majority continues at their age, or another individual who's not 10 years younger than you. So a dear friend, a partner, a sibling, but you can't leave it down a generation or two, which is something people frequently did. It was a very cheap estate planning tool. Doesn't involve any attorneys. So they've made that now where they want it withdrawn within 10 years. So if you leave it to your child, it now has to be withdrawn within 10 years. And so they have to pull it up, and some of that goes to taxes. That is one of the changes there. Not quite so good. Where this comes into play would be that you may want to relook at your beneficiary designations and make sure the decisions you made under the previous rules still make the most sense. Usually you leave money to someone younger because, after all the taxes, it made sense, this bucket of money. So, it makes sense to reorganize who's inheriting what based on the new rules. So those are a few big components of the Secure Act. So that was coming out without all of this virus stuff. Then we get another act, we get the CARES Act. Big portion of the CARES Act are all of the loans and subsidies to companies, the PPP and so on and so forth. I'm not going to cover much of that today because my focus is more individual, and because a lot of those have already hit their windows when you had to apply. So a bit past tense as of now, and more likely it will be coming in the latest waves of the next wave of stimulus packages, like Kristina mentioned, that we'll be hearing about over the next month or two here. So we'll see what new programs are there. We're particularly interested in those who hit the smaller businesses, because we know so many folks who own small and mid-sized businesses. So how do we help them work to stay solvent and successful in changing times? But within the CARE Act are some provisions to allow folks to get into their retirement accounts if you need to. So if you have what they're calling a coronavirus distribution, so this means if you have tested positive for the virus, if your spouse, child, or dependent has tested positive, if you have lost your job, had your job reduced, or had to reduce your hours because of childcare or care of another dependent, then you qualify under a coronavirus distribution. And truthfully, what you have to say, you don't need a doctor's note, you just check a box on a form. So take that as you will. If you can take a distribution from your retirement accounts, and they've increased the amount there. And the biggest piece is some flexibility in that. You're allowed a distribution up, and they've, distributions used to be up to 50,000 or percent. They've increased that, and the biggest piece is usually if you take a distribution, there's a big slap on the hand, right? There's a 10% penalty for taking it out. 10% penalty's gone. Distributions from retirement accounts, you have not yet paid taxes on the money, therefore taxes are due. But they said you can pay that tax over the next 3 years. Awesome. If you need this money and this is the best place for you to take it, there is an option. I don't prefer people take money from their retirement accounts if they don't have to, but if you can do so at a reduced tax component and particularly without the 10% penalty, it's a potential option there. But the other thing they allowed in it is you can put the money back in. You can take it out and still get it back in. And you don't have to put it back into the same account. One risk I always point out to people if they're going to take a loan, different than a distribution, right? A loan you pay back, a distribution you take it out, go back in usually. If you take a loan from your company plan, most company plans have it where you have to, you set a payback schedule, and that payback schedule comes from your paycheck. What happens if you lose your job? What happens if a better opportunity comes up and you want to leave? I have worked with folks who felt stuck to their current job because they had taken out a 401k loan. So within this, if you take a distribution because of a coronavirus qualified distribution, you can pay it back into a different retirement account. Take it out of your 401k. You don't want to pay all the taxes. You come into some more money, pay it back into your IRA. That's a flexibility that is not normal. That is just because of this type of distribution. They've also expanded the amount that's allowed to be borrowed from an account. It used to be a maximum of $50,000 for these kind of distributions, and this year only, you can take up to $100,000 or 100% of your account, whichever smaller, maximum. So what's vested. So you've got a little more flexibility there if that's what you really need to do. And then the other huge thing for the CARES Act is those RMDs, the IRS would like their taxes, please, waived for 2020. No make it up, no nothing. You do not have to take a distribution. You're 72 years old or older for 2020. Should you still take a distribution is a question mark. That's dependent on your personal situation, your needs, both income-wise and also like long-run taxes and such. But you don't have to this year, which is great for those folks who didn't want the money, still working, have other sources of income. So that's a great option there, and it's something we've been reviewing with all of our clients. Hey, you don't have to do it this year if you don't want to. The reason that's in there is because the market's tanked, right? The markets have been doing fantastically into 2019. Your R&D amount is based on your account value and the close of the markets December 31. So, if it's dropped 30%, that's a really large percentage you're now taking. If it's the same percentage based on a larger amount. So this is, a really big help to some folks, particularly anybody who was not our client and freaked out and sold. So the amount they have in their account is 30% less because they didn't stay invested and haven't been able to experience the run up that we've had since then and recovery there. So that's another big piece. The other piece of legislation that I think folks are not thinking about right now in the midst of all of this, and does not specifically have anything to do with the coronavirus, is a California program called Cal Savers. There is a new law in the state of California that every employer, and it's phasing in over the next couple of years, that every employer has to offer a retirement plan who's got 5 or more employees. That's a lot of people. And, there's a stopgap there, which is called the Cal Savers program. So they're working with a TPA and an investment company. And so it phases in over the next couple of years. So by June of 2022, every employer has to either have their own plan or be a part of the Cal Savers plan. I see a major issue for my clients with the Cal Savers plan. It is a Roth IRA. This is an opt-out plan, meaning that the employer connects their data to the whatever way this system's working, still getting figured out a little, Cal Savers program, And it must, within it, they open a CalSavers Roth IRA for every employee. Not every employee is eligible to contribute to a Roth IRA. The standard maximum income components are still included. I missed this when they were setting up this legislation. So this is an opt-out program. So each employee, not the employer, the employee has to go onto the site and say, no, I do not want to participate. If you make too much money to contribute to a Roth, you have to log in and tell it every single year that you do not want to participate. And it's an automatic contribution. If you do not want to contribute, you have to log in and tell it you do not want to contribute. Starts at 3%, goes up by 1% every year, I believe until max of 5%. I love the concept of helping people save for retirement. I love Roth IRAs, but I so frequently see here in the Valley that once someone has enough liquidity that they are ready to start saving for retirement, they usually make too much money here to contribute to a Roth. We live in an expensive area. So this is a piece that's coming down, and there are some great opportunities included in the CARES Act and Secure Act, both of them, for some nice subsidies for starting a 401k. It's actually a great time to start one, completely aside from this new California program, those are the federal regulations, this one's California. So if you are a business owner and you do not yet have a retirement plan, now's a really great time to look into that. There's huge subsidies, tax credits and such to get a plan started. And then you do not need to be part of this somewhat awkward new California program, which likely will not benefit your higher paid employees, and generally, frequently not the owner, as you make too much money to contribute to a Roth. So those are a few regulations and things that are out there and changing right now. And that's, part of how all this is, part of why I do planning, to help and figure those pieces out. So what else is there? What can an individual do? We have seen within the markets in general, a huge flight to cash. In times of uncertainty, people hold more cash. We've seen a savings rate in this country that is pretty much unprecedented. Some of that is sad, really, as a country, are terrible savers. And so it is a good time to look at what we call your sleep at night number, your emergency and opportunities reserves, and make sure that's really in line. I like that number to be 3 to 6 months of your bare minimum expenses. And what are bare minimum expenses? Household, rent or mortgage, property tax, utilities, food, basic things. The stuff that if it all exploded, you would still pay for, because you're not going out to eat in those scenarios. You're not buying new clothes. Those are all the things that you don't need to include in your bare minimum calculations. And then, should it be 3 months? Should it be 6 months? It depends on your circumstances. If you are self-employed and your income varies a lot, lean larger. That's where you should lean more to the 6 months. If you are a W-2 employee with a very stable company, you've been there a long time, you could potentially lean closer to the 3 months. It also depends on who relies on you. Dependents, get children, a little more should be saved. If you're single, or if you're married and just the two of you, no children that you're supporting, be a little on the lower side. I do agree to a point of flight to cash in that many people did not have enough cash. Cash doesn't fluctuate, doesn't grow. Interest rates are about nothing, but there is a tremendous level of stability there. It also should allow your other investments to be more nimble. Kristina and I see this all the time as we're working with clients, that if we more clearly know and have, lead time on when you're going to need income, are able to do much more efficient things with your investments versus emergency pullouts. Way too often, those are ill-timed with the markets. Your emergency pullout and the market is also just tanked. So if we have time horizon, we're starting to build that. It may look annoying as we send more and more cash, but that's because we're getting ready to send it out to you in the most efficient ways. So yes, it is a time to consider cash. The other piece there would be, if you are a homeowner, it's a good time to look at your mortgage. Mortgage interest rates are historically low once again, and so it is worthwhile to consider, does a refinance make sense for you? A refinance is not cheap, both in transaction cost and in headache, as you gather paperwork and such. The underwriters are much more carefully looking at how firmly you are employed. I had someone doing one recently where the underwriter was wanting to see a pay stub every pay period throughout the transaction process. Which if it takes a little while, because the underwriters are slow, because they're also working from home, that's a lot of pay stubs they're wanting to see. Okay, are you still employed there? Are you still employed there? But it's a worthwhile consideration in this time. If your interest rate is, north of 3.5, 3 3/4, you may be able to get a lower rate. In any refinance, my first consideration thing I want you to consider is, could you also go down in duration? Could you go down to a 15-year? In general, I really like to have a mortgage somewhat timed with a retirement date. So if you're 15 years from retirement, great if your mortgage could be 15 years. That way it's paid off. You go into retirement with a sudden much lower outflow needed. If a refinance does not make sense for you and you do have some liquidity, the other thing worth considering is, I just forgot what it's called right now. It'll come to me. But it's a format where you pay a lump sum to your lender, recast. There we go. And they recast your mortgage. They don't change the interest rate or the duration, they just change your payment. For some situations, this can be really useful. If you need a little more, positive cash flow on the day-to-day, but you have a chunk you could put in there, you pay a lot less in interest over time because you just reduce the principal, you're paying more. So that's another consideration. The biggest plus to a recast is, in general, they are free compared to a refinance, which is expensive and you have to gather all that. Those are some main considerations I've got. The other, last big thing is, if your work is stable and you have positive cash flow, now is a fantastic time to save. It's a great time to increase your retirement plan contributions. A good time to add to your investments. Markets are more volatile, yes, but we're looking at funds that have a long time horizon. By long, I mean, 10 years plus until you're going to need to use it. It's a great time to do so and really see some of these long run returns, such as the short pop-up we saw even this year. And to really be able to take advantage of such things, you got to stay invested. And particularly continue to add in. I love retirement accounts because they're mindless, right? Particularly your 401k, 403bs. You pick a percentage and it goes out of your paycheck every pay period. You don't have to remember. You don't have to budget for it. You don't have to think about your investments. It just goes. It helps reduce the psychological challenge of investing, particularly in challenging times, because it just happens for you. And you automatically dollar cost average in. You are automatically buying more shares when the markets are lower and buying fewer shares when the markets are higher. It works out really nicely in the long run. I've seen it time and time again. Real fun to see clients' 401ks come back amazingly quickly following the drop because they're continuing to put some in, and that just provides tremendous octane for growth in the future. So those are a few things that I really wanted to talk about and show some things that are worth considering for your own situation. And if I could be of a help with any of this, Kristina, please reach out to us. This is what we do day in and day out. Kristina, would you like to join back in, or we'll go to some Q&A?
I'm back. Great talk, Katie. Really appreciate that. It's in all the years we've been doing this, I'll speak for me, a bit longer than Katie. I can't think of a time we've had this many changes taking place to the rules and also to the opportunities. And a couple of I want to call them little disclaimers, and I'm going to jump into a few of the questions that's popped up here. One is that keep in mind that we're giving very generalized advice, and everybody's situation is different, as well as the fact we have a wide audience in various states, and tax laws also vary. So please take any information that you hear from either Katie or myself and run this by your professionals. If you're clients of ours, we will go as far as we can, but we'll always consult with and work closely with your CPAs and your legal advisors. But understand, this is high-level ideas to inspire you in this time of great change, but it's not absolute recommendations. For those of you that are our clients, you can get those anytime. For those of you who are not, feel free to reach out to us. Meet with us, ask questions, and you can decide whether or not our services meet your needs, but at least you get a start. Again, in this time of great change, it's a great time to review and revisit and just make sure everything's aligned with your future goals. I'm gonna jump in specifically to, I got a few questions kind of talking a bit more about Rising Cases 2.0. So I'm gonna, again, I've said this so many times now, there's a giant disclosure, I'm not a COVID expert, I'm an economist, and a lot of the information I get from this, I actually get from really good and reputable sources. It's clean from political rhetoric or agenda, it's just data. But I am taking the data and kind of incorporating it into the economic components to it, but I'm well aware that there are health and social aspects to it that while I'll touch upon, because it all is intertwined, I see that there are many, many different beliefs around COVID and what to do and what not to do. The one thing I want to say, one question that came in is, do you think the cases are rising because our president is not wearing a mask? Okay, I'm delving, I told you I'll answer every question, so I'll answer every question. Choices are made on an individual level, but of course they're influenced by many factors. Ultimately, it is somewhat probably complicated when the rules keep changing and the rules are different county to county. The rules in this office in Aptos, California are entirely different than the rules in our office in San Jose. That's just from an employer standpoint. So it does get complicated. The rules about mask wearing are different here than different there. This county is still open, and if I go to San Jose, it's partially closed again. It's confusing, and I think a lot of times people just don't know and are just not certain. And I don't necessarily think it's the behavior of the people around us that affects us as much as our own comfort level and our own navigating this environment for ourselves and our family. I know it was a kind of a dangerous territory to wade into, but I made the commitment I'd answer questions, so that's just my thoughts on the matter. I know I don't make choices for myself and my family based on what others are doing. I make my choices based on how I see the science. And all I can say is the most reputable information I'll be able to come up with is mask wearing is 65% effective. It didn't say which types of masks, however. And social distancing is 90% effective. So social distance, wear masks where you feel it's appropriate, and listen to the people that you value. And that's as far as I'm going with it, but at least I answered the question. So I said tax advisor, okay. Are the banks going to be okay? There's nothing at this time that puts any of the banks at any risk. The government is well prepared to fund and backstop any bank that was to fail. They were recently stress tested, and I don't see any risk to any money in the bank, any money in the banks. If you have large sums beyond the FDIC insurance limits and you have concerns, there are other options. Many firms, ourselves included, can hold cash and multiple bank accounts in the same account. Okay, so you can have that level of protection. Be very careful though that there's FDIC insurance and there's not FDIC insurance. So you want to really understand where you're getting that income from, what the risk is. That's very important. But I don't see at this point a specific risk to any of that. Sorry, I got one from one of our clients who is a doctor and an expert in corona. And he's saying, thank you for the emphasis on data regarding corona in lieu of emotional media approach. I'm not using any names of anybody for confidentiality reasons, but okay, thank you, because you actually know more than me about the subject. But it's so intertwined with economics, I feel like I have to talk about it a little bit. All right, last one about the schools. Okay, maybe I should hand this one over to Katie, because Katie actually has 2 boys that are being affected by this. So I'll touch upon the economic part, and then I'll kind of throw the rest of the questions to Katie. The schools. This has an economic component, and I'm just going to talk about that. I'm not going to talk about their other disruption. First off, there's studies coming out now of the huge dispersion in the learning that took place between lower income students and students of higher income families. And I don't recall exactly how the study measured it, but it was basically how well the students were learning remotely, right, and retaining and learning and getting a quality education. Tremendous difference between the family that had the education level and probably still working from home, right? And they could be around their children, as opposed to people that were still working, had to work to pay the bills, and maybe didn't have the educational ability, knowledge, or English knowledge to properly walk their kids through this time. Again, Katie knows more than me since I don't have children in school, and I don't know what the time was like. But economically, this is going to be a big deal. There's a reason that there's a push to open the schools, okay? Not just the parents who want the kids to go back to school, okay? Gotta let Katie talk about that. Economically, schools provide childcare. The schools provide childcare. If the schools are not open, it's going to be a big challenge as more and more companies send their workers back to the workplace. So economically, that is why there's a push, I can say, to have the schools open. I'm sure there's social aspects, I'm sure there's learning aspects, but that's a big deal. And so how that happens, and it's going to be, again, all over the map. Some schools will open up like normal, some schools will not open up for the foreseeable future, but it makes it really, really complicated for family planning. It makes it very complicated for people's willingness to go back to the workforce. And so that is something, again, I'm going to have to Katie. Final question quickly. I got a lot of questions about the stimulus, and I'm only going to answer one of them because of time today, and also, well, I might have a little time, so maybe I can do 2 of them. About the unemployment, extended unemployment of $600 a week, almost certainly that's going to be reduced. It's not going away. It's almost certainly going to be reduced. Obviously, it's a point of contention, but it was an unintended consequence to pay people far more, in half the cases, 43% more than they were making when they were employed. It's unintended consequences. I mean, it's hard put to bring people back to work when they're making more not working. So that is going to phase out and go away. We don't know the specifics yet, but it will change. But it's not going to disappear. It's not going to disappear. There will be some form of additional stimulus. Secondary question to that was the stimulus checks. I think they're going to keep coming. My impression right now is this will be a much smaller stimulus than the last one, and I think it's a wise thing. I know there'll be a lot of push that we need more money, we need more money, we need more money. It's better off to do it slowly and see how it absorbs. We learned a lot from the first one, the CARES Act. There was a lot of mistakes made. Remember how bad the PPP loan thing went, right? Mm-hmm. Confusion across the board, companies couldn't get it. We learn, we do it smarter next time. And yes, I know, a lot of confidence in our politicians when I say that. But ultimately, just like the doctors, just like the nurses, we learn with experience. So we'll do something this time. I'm guessing it's going to be well under the $2 trillion, but who knows when the politicians get going. It could be anything, but it'll be different. And that's good because we can save more dry powder for, there will be more. This is not the last one. Okay, just a couple questions here on the planning front, and then also Katie, if you have extra time and you want to talk a bit about the parents' view of maybe a little bit of what you're hearing and seeing in the school front, because there was a couple questions on that. On the planning side of it, and this came from anonymous, so this is not someone that we know, and they said, how do you know, and I'm not making this question up, but honestly it's a question, how do you know that your financial plan is good? Like or good, there's a slash, accurate. That's it. So you get to answer that question.
Ooh.
So have fun.
A big piece there would be to be looking if all relevant data points are included within a plan. I've seen many plans that don't really include taxes or do not include the taxation of various types of distributions. So if you're younger and working, that's not going to matter as much, but for the long run, calculations within a plan, that is a challenge. The other one is return rate assumptions. I have seen plans done with all sorts of returns. And if you have been doing planning with Kristina and I, you will notice that we use really boring. We would really feel that, particularly due to the fact that I have not seen a software yet that can accurately model the variation that equals our return reality, right? Some years you're going to hit 6%, some years you might get 12, some years -3. The sequencing of returns matters so much, and that is why we use relatively conservative numbers, not ridiculously conservative, but a bit less than you might actually average out, to better include those variations in returns. The return rates I have frequently seen in other plans have been more along the lines of printed return rates of this is what this X account should get. And whenever you take something and compound it for a very long time, it gets real pretty real quick. And so that's a piece I would always take a look at. What are those return rates? How do they actually line up to how your accounts might be doing as a starting point? And if those return rates look anywhere close to the high end of your average, that would be subject within a plan. And then the other piece would be, how are your taxes being calculated within it? Is it really including the calculations of all monies in, all monies out? I am not a tax professional, but I have a fair knowledge of taxes and use some calculations there with a broad stroke. In general, my clients find that their actual tax bill is far less than what I'm assuming in their plan, but it's nice because it allows for some movement.
I'll add one thing that Kay says in my world I see is the plan is not connected to your real life. It's just a bunch of numbers. I say, okay, great, you can retire, or okay, great, you can send your kids to school. But there's so much more to planning, and that's what we do at Sequoia. So much more is, what are your values? What do you want to accomplish, achieve, obtain? What you are, that's the future thing. What are we working for? What are we striving for? What's in your heart and your mind and in your family, the people you care for, the causes you care for? What do you have in your life that you want to, that you value greatly and you'd like to enhance it or protect it or keep it going and enhance it? And what has outlived its usefulness? What is it that you're carrying along that you just don't need any longer? There's so much more to connect your money with your life is a really big step. And the plan is something you just pay a chunk of money for and you chuck it in a drawer somewhere and you say, okay, I did that, I checked that box, got my plan done. It's not relevant for what Katie said, what really is happening. It has to be regularly updated. Is this really happening? B, your life changes. We're making assumptions based on how you feel today. The planner is, how do you feel tomorrow? We have had a lot of clients reaching out to us to redo planning around COVID because they've really rethought their lives, and what they thought they wanted to do a year ago is not what they want to do now. So it has to be real, it has to be a living document, and it has to really fit with you on more levels than just intellectually the numbers calculate out. And the other question about what came back to the housing, and it said, my mortgage broker advised me to refinance my house. but I don't really think it's necessary because I can afford the mortgages. But it kind of basically, should I listen to him? And I don't know who that's.
Mortgage,
Yeah, go ahead.
when I do that, I like to look at the, what's the break even on all the fees relative to what you're saving in the new mortgage. So, and that is a component of how long you stay in the property. And then I also look at how much are you spending in interest for the life of the loan. That's where, if you're somewhat down the line and you refi into another 30-year, it may actually be more money in the long run because you're paying it over a longer time period. So look at how much does it cost to do the loan, so all the transaction costs, and how much are you saving in payments and interest? What's the break even there? And so it's not always worth doing.
Okay. We have a couple more minutes, and I only need about a minute or so to close. So did you want to add anything about the parents' view of education in time of COVID?
Sure. That's a wild one right now. From what I am seeing within parents I know in my children's school district, I have 2 boys in early elementary school, is that it's looking like, at least within California, majority of districts are starting with distance learning, and then how they're transitioning to in-class teaching is going to depend on the district and the school board in those districts. Some districts have set technical medical parameters. When there are no more than X number of cases, we'll consider moving back to in-person. Others are just saying we're setting certain dates when we are reviewing the data to move back to in-person. So it is depending wildly on the area and the district. And how well distance learning has gone, Kristina said it correctly. It depends tremendously upon family dynamics and what is available there. And I mean, for little ones, it is essentially homeschooling with help of a teacher-ish. So that is a considerable economic strain upon, nationally, I would say. If parents are working from home, how much are you able to work while you also essentially homeschool? It's going to depend tremendously there. So I do feel that, for those who school is a decent percentage of their child care, it is a big impact on their lives and their economic viability versus, those I know who one parent stayed home, they are far less concerned because it's not as big of a change. The other piece relative to distance learning is physical space. I know very many people who are working from home from their garage because there is not enough room in their house to work in their house with that many other family members there all the time and making noise. So that is, the other challenge there. That's a lot of folks.
I'm chuckling, Katie, because I've seen more of our clients' kids and dogs and cats than I've ever seen. In the very first week when I was actually working from home before I transitioned back to the office, some of my clients got to see my pet rats as they sat on my shoulder and I was doing my Zoom meetings. I mean, people that I knew wouldn't get too freaked out with that. But you're right, that's what I've heard as well. But thank you for that. Thank you for giving us sort of an insight because it's quite
the other piece to it that I have seen and I've heard a lot about is, it is a different pace of life. And I've had many family members and many friends saying, there's some pieces to this which seem really healthy and they're going to look to fight to keep in their lives going forward. So I find that exciting and encouraging to see what that may do for us as a culture going forward.
That's beautiful. It really fits into the theme of people rethinking their lives, being forced in a situation they never had managed, and then taking the good from it and incorporate it into their lives. Well, we're at the hour, so I'm going to wrap up. I wanted to briefly talk about the next one. We're doing these. We're going to continue with every 2 weeks as we've been getting the input to do that. Future ones I'll talk about first quickly. We're going to do elections and the economy. We're going to wait till after I can't think of what the word is. We don't want to get the whole groups together. Sorry, I'm totally forgetting that word right now. The Democrats do theirs, the Republicans do theirs. Convention. There we go. After that, then we're going to get into the specifics around elections and the economy, and it's a really, really important one, so don't miss that. But I want to talk about next week's. This one is one to have your teens, to have your 20-somethings watch. If they can't make the time, register them so they get the recording, because this is about how to do smart things with money. It is designed for all age groups, teens on up. It's fun, it's interactive, it's some pretty good stuff. We've gotten great feedback. I was supposed to be doing this live and in person with people over the summer, and I just kind of incorporated it to our new virtual world. And I will also do an update on the economy in the beginning of that one. So I can encourage that. So doing smart things with money, designed for everyone, adults and younger people. And honestly, the people who've been most of all interested have been the adults. So definitely worth watching. That'll be in 2 weeks from today. And again, tremendous gratitude and thank you to all of you who are clients and have been entrusted us through these times, not only with your money, but with your life's planning. It means a tremendous amount, and the level of love and gratitude that I have is pretty much impossible to say in words. Know that we watch closely, and we apply what we should to each and every individual situation. And if those of you that are not yet working with us, if you have an interest, please don't hesitate to reach out to us, even if it's just to ask some questions. We are not salespeople. We're past that point. We just want to help and advise and guide you in the right direction. And if not, just continue to listen to these and share them with others, because during times of uncertainty, our goal is to provide accurate, timely information without an agenda, and as best as possible, politically free. Thank you all, and have a great afternoon. Bye for now.